feeling so nostalgic today. I'm sitting on the porch tonight, feeling the warm air caress my face, thinking about all the times you stood by my side when everything seemed heavy. You listened to me breathe through tears without ever asking for anything more. You laughed with me even on the days when my smile was soon to appear. Every moment with you softened the noise in my head. And today I just want to say how much that meant. You walked with me when the world seemed too difficult, and I never took a step alone.
We had a wonderful coach, Miss Silford, and we won the championship a couple times, the Little Six Conference. Miss Silford was our coach, and she said, now girls, said, now we're going to Trine, North Carolina, and said, I want to tell you a little story about Trine. See, when you get up there in that gym, there's a potbelly stove at the end of the court. Now y'all gonna have to be careful when you go flying down that court, because that potbelly stove's hot. We had to watch that. So we had a good time going to other towns, you know, because we come back and said, golly, aren't we fortunate? Aren't we fortunate, you know?
Mr. Frank Booker, he was the main one. He would go down there, rain, shine, sleet, or snow, he'd go to the river and fish. That was his pastime, and he would catch catfish. And he would take them home and he would clean his catfish, and my daddy would buy some from him. I forgot, 50 cents, maybe he get 3 or 4, enough to feed our family. And so him in particular, Mr. Frank Booker, he was religious about going to that spot, and nobody could sit in his spot at that river. That was his spot.
But I remember one fellow in particular, he was from Baltimore, and he drove a tractor for Mr. Cramer. He would do all the grass cutting and stuff around the farm. And he would tell me stories about on Saturday afternoons, the guys in Baltimore would go down on the river and fish. And he said they'd have little fish fries down on the riverbank. But he said, while we were down there, he said, I might, and the other fellows might take just a little drink. But said, we're just having a good time. We didn't get out of anybody's way, you know. And said, we started wrestling on the riverbank. And he said, everybody knew a certain move in wrestling. And he called it wrestling. And he would just stand up and he would show us guys some of the moves that guys would make, you know, and he said, well, I'd do this and I'd juke him here and then I'd flip him over my shoulder. And he was just full of stories about the men having Saturday afternoons where they could fish and enjoy each other's company.
The man that lived across the street from us was Ide Reese, and I'm sure you know the Reeses, related to Ted and all the Reeses that we know. And he lived across the street from me, and he would sit on the porch and play his fiddle. And we would just listen for him to play the fiddle, and Greg and Jeff Ramsey lived next door to me growing up. So we'd be out in the yard playing, and we'd hear, my dad made me call him Mr. Reese. You know, I had to call adults by their Mr. and Mrs. So we'd say, there's Mr. Reese on the porch, let's go and listen to him play the fiddle. So we would go over there, and he had all these little games and things that he had handmade, little games he made himself. And Greg and Jeff and I, we had the best time going over there and just spending time on the porch with him, and he'd tell us stories, and we loved him.
Well, as a young boy, some of my friends was Quinn Patterson Jr., Fred Glenn, Ronnie Neely. Quentin Patterson Jr., he's deceased now, and it's hard to know what to say now. We just, like I say, I'm just familiar with Baltimore community.
Well, Charlie Cozart was a great friend. They were about 5 or 6 Cozart kids, and he was, I think, the third in that family, but he was a real good friend. A guy named Alfred Heumann was an excellent friend that I spent a lot of time with. You know, in a small town like this, you made friends with about everybody. It was just a good special town to be a part of. I remember George Reese being a good friend. Dick Lowe was a good friend.
I felt like sometimes that the entire street raised me because there was a family, also the Keeter family. The Keeter family lives where Sandy Stone lives currently. And Flossie Keeter was Miss Keeter's name, and then she was just Flossie to everybody, which is a name that I don't think many people hear anymore, and to say her name Flossie. But Flossie was always, I stayed with Miss Keeter sometimes. My mom, if she was working and needed, when I was very young, before I was school age, and I stayed with Margaret Tigg, who lived beside the Keeters. Margaret Tigg's mother, Mandy Engel, lived on Dawson Street, back at the corner of Dawson, and Mandy was also another person that I would sometimes stay with as a babysitter. And one of my memories of Mandy Engel is she dipped snuff, like a lot of older women, that she always had a dip of snuff in, and kept a vegetable can that she had tore the label off of, or it was a coffee can, vegetable can that she would spit her snuff in. So, and maybe that's a good thing. There's not a lot of women dip snuff anymore, but she did at that time. And
you know, having brothers in the house with you, and then there was a lot of set of other brothers, so we would team up together and play all types of sports, of course, ride bikes, and a lot of things like that.
Mr. and Ms. Howe, he was a postmaster, and his wife, Ms. Howe, was a 5th grade teacher, lived beside us. Mr. and Ms. Reese lived across the street from us. That was from Ab Reese and his wife, Johnny, who was my home ec teacher in high school. And it was two of my friends, Billy and Diane Young, lived around the corner. Ronnie Worley lived across the street. Greg and Jeff lived beside of us. And I'm trying to think who else. Margaret Tigg lived up at the side where I'm living right now. And her children, Michael and Donnie and Dana. But Margaret was a school nurse back then, and everybody loved her.
And I remember Mr. Clifford. He was, I guess he owned a farm, and during this growing season and harvesting season, he would had a big truck loaded with fresh vegetables, and he would come drive around the town and stop at anybody's house that came out and flagged him down. And he would have a couple of boxes of these Krispy Kreme donuts, and Mom would splurge every once in a while and buy a dozen of those, and I think they cost about 60 cents for a dozen, and they were about twice the size that they are now, but that was always a big treat. So we liked Mr. Clifford.
Probably one of the people that was like a brother to me growing up was David Young. And David Young was the chief of police when I was growing up here. And so David was also a volunteer fireman. And so I got involved in the volunteer fire department also because I wanted to be around that, and had a desire. A lot of my friends and older people that I knew, they were involved with the fire department. Some of them were police officers.
People I think about Cramerton, Cam, Benny Cunningham, Jack Cuss. It's just a couple of these. That's about it for right now.
And mine's a little bit different. Bobby's one, but then like I said, when I started in '92, there were several men. Bill Eckerd, Charles Hastings, Paul Lawrence, Carl Holt. A bunch of them were in the Masons, which I joined in '95 with the help from them guys. And I learned a lot through Cramerton. Learned a lot about Cramerton with their, and Benny Cunningham and Art Shoemaker. And over the years, my office become like a, they would come, they would sit down, and you know, they may be in there an hour, 2 hours, but I would listen to them, and they would tell me stories about Cramerton and how they're growing up and how the mill ran the recreation department and all that. And just hearing their stories made me want to make the kids I had at the time enjoy the same stuff that they did.
But and another man from Baltimore that I'll never forget him, Mose Fuel. He was a great guy. He worked for the mill company for years, and every time we seen him, he would just be grinning. And he had a gold tooth right on the side of his mouth. And whenever he grinned, you could see that gold tooth. But I've never seen him frown. He always had a happy smile on his face. Hey, how you doing? He was just a very, very pleasant man. Anybody that knew Mose knew what a great guy he was.
Sue Dillard, she was my Sunday school teacher, who was absolutely a godly, wonderful woman. And another woman that's alive now that lives on, can't think of the street, it's near the Circle, Omi Moore. These were just good, godly people that I just looked up to. I'm trying to think, Dick Lowe, he's another one. You know, of course, my parents and my aunt who lived in Cramerton as well. But there are a lot of wonderful, iconic people that came out of Cramerton, just really good people.
Fred Glenn, you know, Jerry Sallin and myself were classmates. Horace Johnson, Fred Glenn brother Bill, had a cousin, Clifford Hill, Buford Hill, Hammer Anderson, let's see, I know it's some old Robert Furneberger, Shirley Furneberger, Judy Anderson, Quinn Patterson, Leonard Patterson, Frankie Patterson, Maurice Patterson.
The Old Town men played horseshoe, and the depot where the mail came in, it came down, was slid down the ramp. Someone would pick it up. But the Old Town men, every day before work, they would meet there and they would play checkers. And so that was, horseshoe and checkers were basically their sports. And the Garrisons, just like the Overcashes had so many people living in Old Town, the Garrisons did too. There were about 3 or 4 of those brothers who had multiple children. And the Garrisons went on to be national checker champions.
My dad also, if you go into the rec center here in Cramerton, there's a picture on the left when you're walking into the gym of an eagle. It's on a white background, and it's a purple and gold eagle. And if you look in the bottom right corner, it says H.L. Parker. That was my dad. He painted that picture.
Ben Cunningham, he was always around, or we were always around him. He coached just about any sport that you could think of, especially basketball and baseball. And I remember when he was coaching Little League or Teener League baseball, I was a catcher, And I remember standing by home plate, and Ben would take, they call it an infield fungo type of bat, and he could hit a ball straight up, almost out of sight, and I would stand there going around in circles as a young catcher trying to wait for the ball to come down.
But I remember in college, the first English class I had, the professor came in to write me an essay on your most unforgettable character. And I wrote one on Ben Cunningham. So
I'm going to start with my Baltimore Drive. Miss Mabel Tate was famous for her hamburgers, that she would make hamburgers and sell them to us. I think they were only probably at that time a quarter. But she made the best hamburgers, and I cannot forget them. So that's the highlight for me. Also, Miss Mamie Boyd was fortunate enough to have a little store she found, and that was something new for us. I think that was my junior high school days, that Miss Mamie Boyd had a store, and you could even get a credit. If you didn't have the money, she would write your name down, and that's how much you owed her, and so that was fun.
One thing I'll never forget is the second mayor, Mike Michaels. He was a great guy. He was very pleasant. He did not stand over anybody and watch what they did. Every Thursday morning, he would come to the bank, and when he left the bank, he would come to the town hall, and he would sit down with the town clerk and find out if he had any messages or any papers he had to sign or anything he had to take care of. And after he took care of his business there, he would sign what checks needed to be signed. Then he'd come back into my office and sit down, and we'd just have a few pleasantries, talk just in general, and then he would ask, was there anything that he needed to look at, or was there anything on my mind that I needed help with or whatever. And but he was a great guy. And after he would spend his hour at town hall, then he'd say, well, if y'all need me, just give me a call.
And Abe Stroop, another great coach, baseball coach, Little League. And then we had a guy that a lot of people revered. That was Benny Cunningham. And Benny, a friend of the boys. He, worked with us, and he encouraged us. And when we were playing Beaver Creek, our last game of our high school career, he came into the locker room at halftime. He said, boys, he said, if you win, I'll take you over to Staley's Steakhouse in Charlotte, and I'll treat you all to a steak. Well, guess what? We didn't win, and Benny didn't take us to get a steak.
But yeah, High Street was where I grew up mostly. And the people I lived with, the neighbors that I had were John and Thelma Rigler. They lived in the last house on the left. Then the Reese's, Ted and Sarah and Tim and Myra, they were next door. And then the Harrises, well, the Van Pelts, Admiral and Rose and Nancy and Jim, they lived across the street. Then the Harrises, May and Calvin and Charles. I'm not real sure who lived in the next house. Last house on the first house on the left on High Street would be the Ferrises, Morris and Kat and Donna, Marcia, and David. And David was my closest friend growing up all the way till we were, 14, 15 years old probably.
William Guy and Leo Fox, Paul Klein and Doug Klein, Randy Parton and Bob Phillips, Bob Paget and Harley Paget. Those were the close friends that I always ran around with or would saw just about daily.
I was kind of the youngest kid on the block at the time in that one section. Lived like 1, 2, 3, 4 houses down from the Cozarts, and all of their Bill and Nell Cozart and all their children, and then Larry Summerlin and the Summerlin boys, twins, Mickey and Mike, and they had a sister named Sally. Larry Nichols and his family, his 2 sisters and parents. Larry Nichols has written a book about Washington Street in Cramerton. The Browns, David Brown, Jerry Brown, they were 4 older sisters, and their parents lived on the other side of my grandparents. Some of the Reese, Vernon Reese, his family, the Van Pelts at the top of the hill there, Jenkins, Harvey and Eula Mae Jenkins and their 2 sons, Jim and Gene, and so Butch Lay, I know that's a name that a lot of people know, was about 3, 4 houses down from me.
Well, my mother, they give her a nickname, Kenai. That's Ben Cunningham called her that because she was a cloth inspector, and she had an eye for inspecting the cloth, and she'd find all the slubs and everything that came out of it.
My best friend, Gloria Holzhauser, she is now Gloria Hatfield. We were best friends and we were in the same class every year from 2nd grade through 6th grade.
There was a couple of barbers down there, I think John and Louis Andrews at the time, the old barber shop. And since my dad was involved in dancing, he was part of the Gingham Square Dance team when they went to the Ed Sullivan show. And when they performed down there, there was a big group of them there. But my dad used to be a professional tap dancer, and he did dance at the old schoolhouse up here at Cramerton and did a lot of different shows up there from what I can remember. And when he would take me down to the barbershop down there in Cramerton, it was just such fun memories. All the old timers would be down there, the men of the town, and they would say, "Raymond, why don't you and Ray just cut a jig?"
My mom is Rosalie Armstrong. She was the head custodian at the Cramerton School here in Cramerton, and I would come with her sometimes back over to the school. And she was, like I say, the head custodian, and then we shopped at the Featherston grocery store here in downtown Cramerton. And my uncle Neil Armstrong was one of the first black persons to be able to work in a grocery store here in Cramerton.
I remember my first opportunity to go play Lakewood was with Bill Guy. A lot of you will remember that family, Bill and Meyer Guy, great people. That's Jennifer Ramsey's mother and father, and anyway, Preston's Guy, the pharmacist in town. That's his dad. What a great guy he was. And
the way I got involved was we had a men's breakfast club, and Ted Reese was one of the people. Ted Reese passed away a couple of years ago, but he was in the breakfast club and he was involved with the Centennial, and he set up in the city hall for months collecting artifacts, and people would come in and bring artifacts on loan. He'd fill out an application, document them, and so forth.
Let's see, my friend Sandra Garrison, she lives in Virginia now. We were very close. And Robin Roberts, Mike Roberts' daughter, he lived right up here at the top of Center Street in that very first house. We played together a lot, had a lot of slumber parties and played a lot of sports together. And let's see, who else? And of course, Greg Ramsey, he's like a brother to me. He's like my little brother, Greg and Jeff. And Sandy used to babysit Jeff because they live next door to us. And we got in all kind of messes, Greg and Jeff and I. but we had fun.
Well, I think Joey Metz was one. He and I went out for baseball together, and we had to hang on to get a uniform because we didn't make the 18-member cut the first year, and he and I both hung on, got our uniforms, and played quite a bit. So.
And we had one police officer in Cramerton, downtown, Mr. Teeter, and he was our police officer. And he worked around downtown, you know. I'd go to the store and I'd always talk to him. And he was so sweet to all of us, you know. And he said, "Don't worry, we'll look after you." And I said, "Okay." So he was really nice.
Well, I like to say my first friend was Don Davis. Mother and Polly Davis shared a room at Gaston Memorial Hospital. We were born on January the 7th. Don and his brother were born on January the 9th. So Don has been a lifelong friend. There were other folks, let's say Warren Nesbitt, was a close friend, Belly Jenkins, Ronnie Boyles, Jimmy Stroop, Billy Boyles. Keith Young Jr. was probably the closest friend in relation to physical location, lived at the end of High Street. So we played a lot of pretend baseball in the backyard, pitching and catching in the backyard. And of course, David Young, his younger brother, was a friend as well. Just Ronnie Wansley. I mean, it was nothing to be able to pick up the phone and call. We want to play baseball at 2:00 down here on the ball field, and you would have folks from what we call the Newtown part come. It was nothing. It wasn't hard at all to find a baseball game put together. So that was just a great group of friends. Tony Weathers, I have to mention Tony Weathers, great basketball player in our group.
We also had neighbors. My Theresa Fox was a friend of mine that lived down. Her family lived 2 doors down from my grandmother. Her mother was a beautician and did my grandmother's hair. And I knew her. She was older than I was, but I knew her growing up. She was a good friend of my cousins who would sometimes come stay during the summer. And when I worked my first summer at the mill, she was working there. She was expecting her first child.
My dad drove the truck, and I think it was green. It's this little green truck for Forbes Super Rat. He delivered groceries to everybody in Cramerton. So therefore, he got to know what? He got to know almost every family in Cramerton. And he would come home and talk to us about, well, I was at Nate Leaper's today, and she made me a great, nice, sweet pound cake. And I grew up knowing that he knew lots of people in Cramerton. He and Benny Cunningham were very good friends. Jim Forbes, Court Featherston, Dr. Eppert, Dr. Davis. They knew him and he knew them. The Leapers, the Queens, the Tiggs, not the Tiggs, but Betty Tiggs' family. The policeman here, and I think was Betty Tiggs' father, if I make no mistake. They all knew each other very well, and he communicated with people as if they were part, and they communicated with him as if they were families. And that's the really unique thing about Cramerton. I think that still exists a lot. I don't know if, like the Shellmans, grew up here, and my dad knew them, and when I got in the school system, they knew my dad.
My memory is a lady, Mrs. Howe. Dora Howe lived here in Cramerton, and she was a nurse in Gaston Memorial hospital, the old Gadsdenville Hospital. And she was so nice to me. She encouraged me to go to nursing school, and she would pick me up every morning on her way to work and take me to nursing school. And when she got off, I would come back home with her. And she was Cherokee Indian, but she was just almost like my second mother.
I remember also Dr. Davis lived in our neighborhood, and I played with Dr. Davis's children. Some of the games that I mentioned earlier, we played together. And also, the Knowles were our next door neighbors for a long time. And Tommy Knowles was a good friend of ours and a good friend of my brothers and sisters.
One of my favorite people who had a great mentor in his life, which I knew him as well, Artie Shoemaker. Good gracious, what a guy that just tirelessly puts in the personal time to go out for any cause. And of course, his mentor, I guess, was Benny Cunningham. I think the bridge right down here is named after Benny. And Benny was heavily involved in, youth sports and stuff. My grandparents stayed in Cramerton. They were here my mom was born in 1935 on Center Street, and they lived in that same house all the way up to my grandmother passed away in 96, and then my grandfather passed away in 2001. So that house on Center Street, 179 Center Street, and then Lisa and Sandy Stone's grandparents lived beside us. So Center Street was the street of that we all of our grandparents and all my aunts lived on Center Street. My grandmother had 3 sisters on Center Street, 2 over here in Newtown. Then everybody congregated to 179 Center Street. So that was a big part of my life right there, growing up on Center Street. In those days, everybody we all kind of hung out at each other's houses, on each other's front porches. We knew supper was going to be at 5 o'clock. If you wasn't there, you was going to miss out, We might eat over at Miss Stone's house. We might eat over at Miss Walker's house. We might eat, at Bobby Roberts' house, just wherever we were at that particular time of day.
And and then my brother Kyle, who of course has the infamous Kyle Fletcher's Barbecue, put that plug in there. They're still going strong. Kyle passed away a year and a half ago. But he's left his legacy. A lot of people still miss him a lot, and of course the family still miss him a lot. He was kind of bigger than life guy. He's kind of like my Uncle Ben Cunningham, who was a kind of a legend around Cramerton. There's a lot of stories about him, and
I think one of the people who also has just been a real driving influence in the community, really probably maybe more so than anybody I know, that maybe even kind of picked up the mantle from when, as Art Shoemaker has slowed down, is Jeff Ramsey. He sure works tirelessly for the community, whether it be in whatever public service position he has. I think whether it be the school board or whether it's on the historical committee or, whatever, raising money for a sign to go up in the park. If it happens, you look hard enough, you'll find Jeff Ramsey.
Well, my dad loved sports. He played football. He played basketball. He did not play baseball like my brother did, but he played in many sports. He coached the midgets in Cramerton when they had teams. He worked at Burlington Industries for 20 years before he went to another company. He born and raised right here in Cramerton, went to Cramerton School, met my mother in college and brought her here to teach in Cramerton School.
I had a few guys that I hung out quite often with. One of them was Tracy Turner, one of them was Darrell Watts, and then there was, Chris Conrad, there was Kyle Fletcher. There was just a handful of us that went to the school down here at Cramerton that we just hung up with. Jimmy Stroop was another one, and we would just kind of just roam the town and hang out and just do all kind of events and things of that nature. And I remember we used to get, we'd ride our bikes and get, we would walk basically back down to the drugstore, and Steve Kaiser was Jim Kaiser's son. He had a 66 Chevy Chevelle. And we used to get in that thing with him and do burnouts.
The influence of those people, the love that they had for my dad and that my dad had for them, has been really one of the most remarkable things that I can think about Cramerton.
Hey, my dear friend, I'm feeling so nostalgic today. I'm sitting on the porch tonight, feeling the warm air caress my face. Thinking about all the times you stood by my side when everything seemed heavy. You listened to me breathe through tears without ever asking for anything more. You laughed with me even on the days when my smile was soon to appear. Every moment with you softened the noise in my head. And today I just want to say how much that meant. You walked with me when the world seemed too difficult, and I never took a step